The evolution of women's rights movement and its implications on modern future society. For most of human history, half the population had no legal right to vote, own property, divorce abusive husbands, control their own bodies, or pursue education beyond what men permitted. Women were property, first of their fathers, then of their husbands. Their testimony wasn't equal to men's in courts. Their earnings belonged to their spouses. Their children could be taken from them at a husband's whim. This wasn't ancient history. This was America in 1850, Britain in 1900, much of the world in 1950. And then, in less than 2 centuries, a blink in historical time, everything changed. Women gained the vote, access to education, property rights, reproductive autonomy, legal equality, professional opportunities, political power. The transformation was so rapid, so comprehensive, that we now live in a world our great-great-grandmothers couldn't have imagined. But how did it happen? Who fought these battles? What were the costs? And what are the implications, intended and unintended, for the society we're building now and the future we're creating? Tonight, we're tracing the evolution of the women's rights movement from its earliest stirrings to its current manifestations and future trajectories. This isn't just women's history. This is human history. Because when you fundamentally alter the social, legal, and economic status of half the population, you transform everything. This is Hidden Histories. To understand the revolution, we must first understand what it was revolting against. In the Western legal tradition inherited from England, women existed under the doctrine of coverture, a legal framework codified by William Blackstone in his 1765 Commentaries on the Laws of England. Coverture meant that upon marriage, a woman's legal identity was absorbed into her husband's. As Blackstone explained, by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage. The practical implications were staggering. A married woman could not own property. Anything she brought into marriage or earned during it belonged to her husband. She could not sign contracts or conduct business in her own name. She had no legal right to her children. Custody belonged entirely to the father. She could not divorce except in the most extreme circumstances, and even then only with legislative or ecclesiastical approval. Her testimony in court was worth less than a man's. If her husband beat her, that was considered a private family matter. The phrase rule of thumb allegedly comes from the idea that a man could legally beat his wife with a stick no thicker than his thumb, though this etymology is disputed. Educational opportunities were severely restricted. Universities were male-only. Professional schools didn't admit women. Most secondary education for girls focused on accomplishments, music, drawing, French, designed to make them attractive marriage prospects, not intellectual preparation. The few women who did pursue serious education faced mockery and exclusion. The assumption was that women's brains were smaller, less capable of rigorous thought, and that excessive study would damage their reproductive systems. This wasn't religious extremism or primitive barbarism. This was the Enlightenment-era Western world. The same societies that were championing liberty, reason, and human rights for men. Women existed in legal and social subordination so complete, so normalized, that most people, including most women, accepted it as natural, divinely ordained, and unchangeable. But a few didn't. July 19, 1848. Seneca Falls, New York. A small women's rights convention that would change history. About 300 people attended, including 40 men. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a young mother frustrated by her legal powerlessness, presented a document modeled on the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. The Declaration of Sentiments listed 18 grievances against the tyranny of men over women. Among them, he has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has made her, if married, in the eye of the law, civilly dead. He has taken from her all right in property, even to the wages she earns. The Seneca Falls Convention launched the organized women's rights movement in America. Its leaders, Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, Lucy Stone, became household names through decades of activism. But the movement immediately faced a strategic question: fight for all rights simultaneously, or focus on one achievable goal. The vote won. Suffrage became the central demand because it was tangible, measurable, and potentially transformative. With political power, women could change laws affecting property, custody, education, employment. The struggle would last 72 years. In Britain, the movement took a more militant turn. Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters founded the Women's Social and Political Union in 1903, adopting the motto, "Deeds, not words." British suffragettes, a term they embraced, smashed windows, set fires in mailboxes, chained themselves to railings, went on hunger strikes when arrested. Emily Davison died in 1913 after throwing herself in front of King George V's horse at the Epsom Derby, becoming a martyr for the cause. The government responded with force-feeding of hunger strikers, a brutal procedure where tubes were forced down women's throats or noses to pump in food. World War I changed everything. With millions of men at the front, women filled roles previously forbidden to them. Factory workers, bus drivers, police officers, munitions workers, agricultural laborers. They proved capable of everything men did, and society couldn't function without them. Britain granted women over 30 the vote in 1918, though full equality with men didn't come until 1928. The United States ratified the 19th Amendment on August 26, 1920, after a final dramatic vote in Tennessee's legislature that came down to a single representative who changed his vote after receiving a letter from his mother. New Zealand had led the way in 1893, the first nation to grant women full voting rights. Australia followed in 1902, Finland in 1906, but the victories were uneven. Switzerland didn't grant women federal voting rights until 1971, Portugal 1976, Liechtenstein 1984, Kuwait 2005, Saudi Arabia 2015. The vote was won, but legal equality remained distant. After suffrage, the women's movement fragmented. The 1920s brought new freedoms, the flapper era, but the Great Depression and World War II pushed women's rights to the margins. Post-war America in the 1950s created a new feminine ideal, the suburban housewife. College-educated women were encouraged to find fulfillment in domesticity, marriage, children, homemaking, supporting their husbands' careers. But many women were miserable, educated, capable, trapped in lives that felt suffocating. In 1963, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, naming what she called the problem that has no name, the deep dissatisfaction of intelligent women confined to domestic roles. The book became a sensation, selling millions of copies. It articulated what countless women felt, but couldn't express. The 1960s exploded with social movements, civil rights, anti-war protests, sexual revolution, and emerging from all of it, women's liberation. Second-wave feminism was broader than suffrage. It demanded equal pay for equal work, access to higher education and professional schools, reproductive rights, and access to contraception, legal protection against sexual harassment and domestic violence, an end to sex-based discrimination in employment, credit, housing, shared domestic responsibilities, and the recognition of housework as labor. The victories came in rapid succession. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 mandated equal wages for equal work, though enforcement remained weak. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited employment discrimination based on sex, added almost as an afterthought by opponents trying to kill the bill, but becoming one of the most powerful tools for women's equality. The National Organization for Women, NOW, was founded in 1966 by Betty Friedan, Pauli Murray, and others to push for enforcement of these new laws. Title IX in 1972 prohibited sex-based discrimination in federally funded education, transforming access to college, professional schools, and athletics for women. Roe v. Wade in 1973 established constitutional protection for abortion rights, framing reproductive autonomy as fundamental to women's equality. The movement had diverse voices. Gloria Steinem became the public face of mainstream feminism through Ms. Magazine, founded in 1971. Consciousness-raising groups spread across the country, small gatherings where women shared experiences and realized their personal struggles were political issues. The personal became political. Sexual harassment wasn't just individual bad luck. It was systemic discrimination. Domestic violence wasn't a private family matter. It was a crime. The unequal division of household labor wasn't natural. It was cultural conditioning, but backlash came too. Phyllis Schlafly led the Stop ERA movement, arguing that feminism threatened traditional family structures and women's special protections. The Equal Rights Amendment, passed by Congress in 1972, failed to achieve ratification by the required 38 states, falling 3 states short by the 1982 deadline. The feminist movement faced accusations of being anti-family, anti-men, and dismissive of women who chose traditional roles. These tensions would only intensify. By the 1990s, a new generation came of age, taking many feminist victories for granted. They'd never lived in a world where women couldn't have credit cards in their own names, couldn't attend Ivy League universities, couldn't become lawyers or doctors. Third-wave feminism emerged as a response to and critique of second-wave limitations. The critique centered on intersectionality, a term coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. The argument, second-wave feminism had centered the experiences of white, middle-class, heterosexual women while marginalizing women of color, working-class women, LGBTQ women, disabled women. Black feminists like Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, and Angela Davis had been making this argument since the 1970s, pointing out that race and class couldn't be separated from gender in understanding oppression. The Combahee River Collective, a black feminist organization, issued a statement in 1977 declaring, "We are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking." Third-wave feminism embraced this complexity. It questioned rigid definitions of gender itself. It challenged beauty standards. It reclaimed words like slut and bitch. It emphasized individual choice, whether that meant choosing a career or choosing to be a stay-at-home mother. Globally, women's movements took different forms based on local contexts. In developing nations, the focus was often basic rights, education access, protection from child marriage and female genital mutilation, economic opportunities. Malala Yousafzai became a global icon after being shot by the Taliban for advocating girls' education in Pakistan. The Arab Spring saw women on the front lines of protests, though post-revolutionary governments often marginalized them. Nigeria's Bring Back Our Girls campaign highlighted Boko Haram's kidnapping of schoolgirls, forcing international attention. Technology transformed activism. Social media enabled rapid mobilization and global solidarity. But it also created new forms of harassment and abuse, directed particularly at women in public spaces. The contradictions multiplied. More women in higher education and professional careers than ever before. But persistent wage gaps, especially for women of color. More legal protections, but high rates of sexual assault and domestic violence. More representation in media and politics, but ongoing objectification and unrealistic beauty standards. The movement became increasingly fragmented. What did feminism even mean anymore? Whose feminism? Which issues took priority? October 2017. Actress Alyssa Milano tweeted, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet." Within 24 hours, the hashtag of Me Too had been used 12 million times. The phrase itself came from Tarana Burke, a black activist who had been using it since 2006 to support sexual assault survivors, particularly young women of color. But Milano's tweet went viral, and suddenly, women across industries were sharing stories of harassment and assault. Harvey Weinstein, the powerful Hollywood producer, faced dozens of accusations. He was convicted in 2020. The floodgates opened. Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, Louis C.K. Les Moonves. Dozens of powerful men fell. Some were clearly predators. Others occupied murkier territory, inappropriate comments, leveraging power for sexual access, behavior that was wrong but not criminal. The movement raised urgent questions. Where's the line between flirtation and harassment? Between bad sex and assault? Between accountability and destruction? Between justice and mob rule? The 2017 Women's March, a response to Donald Trump's presidency, became the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. An estimated 4 to 5 million people participated in the U.S. alone, with sister marches worldwide. But even this was fractured. Debates over inclusion. Accusations that white feminists were only mobilizing now because their candidate lost, while women of color had been fighting all along. Controversies over leadership and messaging. Contemporary feminism faces deep internal divisions. Transgender inclusion. Are trans women women? Do they face the same oppression as cisgender women? Should biological sex or gender identity determine access to women's spaces and sports? The debate has fractured the movement, with some feminists labeled TERFs, trans-exclusionary radical feminists. Sex work. Is it exploitation that should be abolished, or labor that should be decriminalized and regulated? Feminists disagree vehemently. Pornography. Oppression or expression? Harm or choice? Free speech versus safe spaces. Should offensive ideas be debated or deplatformed? The movement that once seemed unified in demanding the vote now encompasses such diverse, often contradictory positions that many question whether feminism has any coherent meaning. Globally, the picture is similarly complex. More women in leadership than ever. Prime ministers, CEOs, Supreme Court justices. New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, Germany's Angela Merkel, Finland's Sanna Marin. But also, backlash. Poland restricting abortion access. Afghanistan, under Taliban rule, forcing women from public life entirely. Even in Western nations, debates over bodily autonomy intensifying, as seen in the U.S. Supreme Court's 2022 Dobbs decision overturning Roe. Progress isn't linear. Rights gained can be lost. In less than 2 centuries, the legal, social, and economic status of women in much of the world has undergone revolutionary transformation, from property to persons, from silence to political power, from domestic confinement to professional achievement, from legal subordination to constitutional equality. The changes are measurable. In 1870, no women could vote anywhere in the world. Today, nearly every nation grants women suffrage. In 1900, fewer than 20% of American women participated in the paid workforce. Today, it's nearly 50%. In 1970, women made up 8% of American medical students. Today, it's over 50%. Similar patterns exist in law, business, academia, politics, though with persistent disparities in leadership positions. The implications are profound and still unfolding. Economically, women's workforce participation has been the largest driver of economic growth in the developed world over the past 50 years. But unpaid domestic and care work, still disproportionately performed by women, remains undervalued and unsupported by social policy. Demographically, access to education and reproductive autonomy correlates with declining birth rates. Every country where women gain full equality sees fertility drop below replacement level. The long-term demographic implications, aging populations, shrinking workforces, are reshaping geopolitics. Socially, traditional family structures have fragmented. Marriage rates decline, single-parent households increase, gender roles blur. These changes liberate many and disturb others, creating social friction that manifests politically. Politically, women's political participation increases representation of different policy priorities. Studies show women legislators prioritize education, healthcare, and social welfare more than male counterparts. But women politicians also face heightened scrutiny, harassment, and violence. Psychologically, the rapid pace of change has left many, both men and women, uncertain about expectations, roles, and relationships. What does partnership mean when neither partner has a predetermined role? How do you raise children without the roadmap previous generations followed? The unresolved tensions are real. Can full equality coexist with biological differences in reproduction? How do societies support the reality that only women bear children without penalizing them professionally? Has the movement overcorrected in some areas, creating new injustices in pursuit of equality? How do we balance the legitimate grievances of those who feel left behind by rapid social change with the equally legitimate demands for continued progress? What happens when feminism itself becomes a site of power that can exclude and marginalize? Looking forward, several trajectories seem likely. Technology will continue reshaping reproduction, IVF, surrogacy, artificial wombs. The implications for gender and family are unpredictable. Workplace structures will continue evolving. Remote work, flexible schedules, potentially making professional achievement more compatible with caregiving, or potentially creating new forms of exploitation. Gender categories themselves may continue blurring as transgender and non-binary identities gain visibility and legal recognition, fundamentally challenging the binary framework on which much feminism was built. Global divergence will likely increase. Some societies racing toward full equality, while others double down on traditional gender roles, creating parallel worlds with radically different opportunities for women. The backlash will persist. Every advance generates resistance from those who benefit from existing hierarchies or genuinely believe traditional arrangements are better, divinely ordained, or naturally suited to human flourishing. But here's what history teaches. Change achieved through struggle isn't easily reversed. Women who've tasted education won't willingly return to ignorance. Women who've experienced economic independence won't readily submit to financial dependence. Women who've wielded political power won't quietly surrender it. The women's rights movement didn't create a perfect world. It created a more just one, a more free one, a more complex one. And like all revolutions, its full implications won't be clear for generations. We're living through the transformation, not viewing it from a settled endpoint. The story isn't over. It's still being written by every woman who makes choices previous generations couldn't imagine, and by every society grappling with what equality actually means. This is Hidden Histories. Like, share, and subscribe for more biblical mysteries, ancient truths, and forbidden knowledge, revealed daily.